The moment you hear the truth about Lilibet, you might find yourself questioning everything you thought you knew about the Sussex family. What if the story that the world has been told for years, of a happy, glamorous, modern royal couple, doting over their children, wasn't quite what it seemed? What if the reality was far darker, far more calculated, and far more shocking than any headline or tabloid could ever convey? You might even feel disbelief wash over you as you consider the implications. Could it really be true that the little girl who has been paraded in public appearances, celebrated for every milestone, was never born the way we were told? And that Meghan Markle, the woman who has captivated the world with her charm, wit, and media prowess, might have been hiding a secret that would shake the foundations of the royal family? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It all begins in a quiet, unassuming Portland hospital, miles away from the gleaming palace halls and glittering media events. A place that few could imagine would become the epicenter of one of the most explosive revelations in modern royal history. Here, nestled in the digital and physical records of the hospital, is information that no one expected to see leaked, information that has now surfaced to expose the truth. Lilibet Diana's arrival into this world was not conventional. The records suggest she was born through surrogacy, a detail meticulously hidden from the public eye, from the media, and, most importantly, from the eyes of the global audience who had celebrated her as a royal child of Meghan and Harry. Imagine for a moment the shockwave that would ripple across the globe. Every smile in a photograph, every carefully staged public appearance, suddenly seen through the lens of suspicion and intrigue. The innocent charm of a child whose every milestone has been documented and praised, now under scrutiny. And at the center of it all is Meghan Markle, caught in a whirlwind of her own making. According to sources close to the matter, when she first discovered that these records might become public, her reaction was nothing short of a meltdown. Screams, frantic phone calls, desperate attempts to contain the information. The scene was chaotic, almost cinematic in its intensity. The woman who has long wielded the media to her advantage suddenly found herself on the defensive, exposed, and vulnerable. But why does this matter now? Why would the Portland hospital records emerge at this exact moment, threatening to dismantle the narrative that Meghan Markle and Prince Harry have spent years cultivating? The timing could not be more explosive. With the couple already navigating public scrutiny, canceled projects, and ongoing tension with the royal family, the revelation of surrogacy has the potential to tip the balance entirely. It's more than a story about a child or a celebrity family. It's a story about image, control, and the very nature of truth in an era where perception often outweighs reality. For years, Meghan and Harry have managed their image meticulously, balancing personal disclosures with media-friendly appearances. Now, the scales have been disrupted, and the world is watching to see what comes next. Consider the implications for the royal family. King Charles, who has spent decades carefully preserving the dignity and continuity of the monarchy, now faces a revelation that challenges not just the personal lives of his son and daughter-in-law, but the public perception of the royal institution itself. The palace is a world of tradition, protocol, and appearances. Every scandal, every hidden truth, reverberates far beyond private walls. And now, with surrogacy confirmed in official records, questions begin to emerge about succession, legitimacy, and public trust. What does it mean for Lilibet Diana's place in the line of succession? What does it mean for the very notion of a modern royal family, where appearances are everything, and secrets are everything too? But it's not just the royal family that's grappling with this news. The media is primed for an explosion. Within hours of the record surfacing, journalists, bloggers, and social media users began piecing together the narrative, speculating on motives, and predicting consequences. Viral headlines, trending hashtags, and endless commentary filled the digital sphere. Every public appearance Meghan had made, every announcement regarding Lilibet, suddenly recontextualized in light of the revelation. And yet, despite the frenzy, there remains a swirl of uncertainty. Who leaked the information? How accurate are these records? And most importantly, what will Meghan and Harry do next? Now, let's consider Meghan herself. For years, she has been portrayed as the modern, savvy royal who knows how to navigate public life, media attention, and personal branding. She has been photographed in glamorous settings, interviewed by major media outlets, and lauded for her poise under pressure. Yet, these very appearances, these curated moments, now stand in stark contrast to the chaos unfolding behind the scenes. According to insider accounts, Meghan's panic was immediate. Calls to lawyers, discussions with publicists, frantic attempts to mitigate the fallout. It all unfolded in real time, and it was anything but calm. She was, in that moment, faced with a scenario she could not control, a narrative she had not anticipated, and a truth that was beyond her influence. For the audience, the revelation ignites curiosity. How did the surrogacy plan come to be? Why was it hidden from the public for so long? Who else knew? And who helped maintain the secret? And what does this mean for the couple's previously celebrated image as a modern, transparent, forward-thinking royal family? Each of these questions is a thread, and as we pull on them, the story begins to unravel in ways that no one could have predicted. It's worth pausing here to reflect on the nature of secrecy and public perception. The Sussex family's narrative has always been carefully constructed, balancing personal disclosure with selective revelation. Interviews, documentaries, and public appearances have created a story that the public could understand and embrace. Yet, the Portland hospital records reveal a tension between image and reality that is impossible to ignore. Every smile, every carefully staged photograph, now carries an undertone of performance. The stakes are higher than ever because the world is not just watching for news. They are looking for contradictions, for cracks in the facade, for the human drama beneath the surface. And this is where we confront the emotional core of the story. Behind the headlines and the media speculation are human beings reacting in real time. Meghan, grappling with exposure and vulnerability. Harry, navigating loyalty to his wife while considering implications for his family and children. The staff at the Portland hospital, caught in an unexpected spotlight. The public, struggling to reconcile admiration for the couple with the shock of this new revelation. These are not abstract concepts. These are real people facing an unprecedented situation. The emotional stakes are enormous, and the tension is palpable. By now, you may be wondering, how did this information come to light? How did a quiet hospital in Portland become the epicenter of a story that has royal and global consequences? The answer lies in a combination of oversight, timing, and perhaps even a touch of fate. Hospital records, usually safeguarded by layers of privacy and protocol, found their way into the hands of someone with access. Whether by accident, intent, or investigative persistence, these documents are now central to a narrative that no one could have fully anticipated. And yet, even as we examine the records, there are contradictions, unexpected twists, and details that defy logic. Public appearances that once seemed innocent are now questionable. Social media posts, interviews, and documentaries, all previously vetted and controlled, must be re-examined. Every detail is scrutinized, every statement reinterpreted, every claim weighed against the evidence now emerging. It is a meticulous process, one that leaves room for confusion, speculation, and controversy at every turn. Finally, let us consider the audience, the millions of people around the world who have followed Meghan and Harry's story for years. The shock is palpable, the intrigue irresistible. Every revelation fuels debate. Was the secrecy justified? Was it deceptive? How will this impact perceptions of Meghan, Harry, and the monarchy as a whole? And perhaps most importantly, what comes next? Will the couple issue statements? Will the palace intervene? And what of Lilibet, the child at the center of this storm? As we close this introduction, one thing is clear. The story is only beginning. The documents from Portland, the reactions of Meghan and Harry, the media frenzy, and the palace's private deliberations all set the stage for an unfolding drama of unprecedented scale. And as the layers peel back, the world will continue to watch, question, and speculate. The world has always adored a story of perfection. And for years, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry presented just that, a modern fairy tale, a royal couple who seemed to combine charisma, glamour, and progressive ideals. But appearances, as we know, can be deceiving. Behind the smiling photos, the carefully curated Instagram posts, and the glamorous public appearances, cracks were beginning to form. tiny fissures at first, almost imperceptible, but over time they widened into chasms. And when the Portland hospital records came to light, those cracks revealed a deeper, far more unsettling truth. The story everyone believed was only a facade. It all began quietly. The Sussexes entered the royal family with fanfare and media fascination. Meghan was the American actress turned princess, the outsider who would charm the British monarchy and modernize it with her global perspective. Harry was the beloved prince, once the cheeky younger son, now stepping into a more serious role alongside his wife. Together, they were a media magnet, a storybook couple whose every move was dissected, admired, or criticized. The world watched, enraptured, believing that what they saw was reality. But as with any carefully staged production, reality has a way of seeping in through the cracks, and when it does, it exposes what was hidden. Early signs of tension were subtle, often overlooked by fans and media alike. There were moments when Meghan's expression betrayed discomfort during official engagements, when Harry's patience seemed to thin behind the cameras. There were interviews that felt too rehearsed, smiles that appeared forced, gestures that hinted at unease. And yet, in the public eye, the couple remained impeccable. The facade was unbroken. The couple's PR team, advisors, and inner circle worked tirelessly to maintain this image of harmony and perfection. Every public event, every appearance, every statement was meticulously orchestrated to project unity, confidence, and relatability. But maintaining such an image comes at a cost. The effort required to mask personal struggles, private disagreements, and hidden truths can be exhausting. And over time, the effort begins to falter. Insiders reveal that behind closed doors, disagreements and tensions were common. Sources described late-night arguments over media appearances, disagreements about strategy, and subtle but persistent struggles for control. Meghan, who had always been portrayed as poised and confident, was reportedly increasingly frustrated by the pressures of royal life, while Harry found himself torn between loyalty to his wife and his family. These private tensions, once contained, were signs that the facade was beginning to crack. The public, of course, remained largely unaware. Every scandal, every rumor, was managed, deflected, or drowned out by carefully timed appearances and statements. When the couple announced their charitable initiatives, their philanthropic work, or their social campaigns, it was easy to forget that behind the scenes, not everything was as harmonious as it appeared. Yet, the cracks were there, visible to those paying close attention, and when the Portland hospital records eventually emerged, those cracks widened into gaps that could no longer be ignored. Consider the implications of such a facade. When a family presents itself as perfect, when the narrative is meticulously controlled, any revelation that contradicts that narrative is explosive. It's not just about Meghan or Harry. It's about the story they have told the world. The story of a modern royal family, balancing tradition with contemporary values, committed to transparency and authenticity. To have that story challenged is to have the foundation of public perception questioned. Suddenly, everything, every smile, every gesture, every public appearance, becomes a potential facade, a mask concealing reality. Even within the palace, the tension was palpable. Royals are trained to maintain composure, to present a united front, and to avoid public conflict at all costs. But when insiders began noticing inconsistencies in Meghan's behavior, or when Harry appeared increasingly protective and defensive, the palace began to take note. Meetings behind closed doors, hushed conversations in the corridors, and discreet advisories about public appearances became more frequent. Everyone was aware that the facade was beginning to falter, that the careful image the couple had cultivated was at risk of exposure. And then came the children. Lilibet and Archie were introduced to the public with the same meticulous attention to detail that had characterized the couple's appearances. Every photograph was staged, every milestone celebrated in the press, every outing carefully timed for maximum positive exposure. But even these seemingly innocent presentations were part of the broader narrative, a narrative designed to reinforce the image of a perfect, modern, loving family. Every child's milestone was a public event, a confirmation of the story the Sussexes wanted the world to believe. And yet, the cracks in that narrative were growing. Insiders note that Meghan's meticulous control over public appearances extended to nearly every detail of the children's lives. From clothing choices to hand placements in photographs, from scheduled smiles to controlled interactions with the press, nothing was left to chance. Harry, while supportive, reportedly began to feel the strain of constant management and scrutiny. What was intended to appear effortless required enormous effort, and the pressure of maintaining this perfect image began to weigh heavily on both parents. As the Portland hospital records reveal, the cracks were not merely cosmetic. They pointed to fundamental aspects of the family story that had been concealed from the public. The revelation that Lilibet was born through surrogacy, rather than in the natural manner presented to the world, challenged the core narrative of the family's transparency and authenticity. It forced a re-examination of every public appearance, every media statement, every carefully managed moment. What was once celebrated as genuine affection and familial closeness was now scrutinized under the lens of potential orchestration and concealment. The psychological impact of maintaining such a facade cannot be underestimated. For Meghan, who had spent years navigating the complex web of royal protocol, media expectations, and public perception, the revelation represented both a threat and a humiliation. Sources describe the moment she realized that the Portland hospital records might be made public as chaotic, even dramatic. Screaming, frantic calls to advisors, attempts to suppress the information. The scene was emblematic of someone suddenly confronted with the fragility of their carefully constructed reality. For Harry, the situation presented a different, though equally complex, challenge. Torn between defending his wife and managing his family's reputation, he faced impossible choices. Every action carried consequences, every statement could be misinterpreted, and every move risked escalating a situation that had already become explosive. The pressure was immense, the stakes unprecedented, and the scrutiny unrelenting. And for the public, the revelation offered both shock and fascination. Social media users, fans, and critics alike began piecing together the narrative, speculating on motives, timelines, and consequences. Every detail of the couple's life, previously seen through a lens of admiration or sympathy, was now open to interpretation and debate. Could the surrogacy have been justified? Was the secrecy a protective measure or a calculated manipulation? The questions multiplied, and the audience engagement reached a fever pitch. In this context, the cracks in the royal facade were more than a minor imperfection. They were the first signs of a structural collapse. The image of perfection, so meticulously maintained, was now vulnerable, exposed to scrutiny from every angle. And as the story unfolded, every insider account, every leaked document, every social media reaction would serve to widen those cracks further. By now, you might be asking, how did the couple manage to keep such a major secret for so long? How did the facade hold, despite constant media attention and public fascination? The answer lies in a combination of meticulous planning, strategic misdirection, and the cultivation of a loyal inner circle. Every appearance, every statement, every photograph was part of a larger strategy to reinforce the image of a harmonious, modern royal family. But even the most carefully crafted facade cannot withstand the weight of truth indefinitely. And here is where the tension reaches a boiling point. With the Portland hospital records now emerging, the cracks are no longer minor. They threaten to reveal the structural weaknesses of the entire narrative. The world is about to see a side of the Sussex family that was carefully hidden for years. Every smile, every gesture, every public appearance is about to be re-examined, and the consequences could be dramatic. And just when it seems like the cracks are at their widest, just when the facade is on the verge of collapse, something unexpected happens. A revelation, a leak, or a reaction that no one predicted is about to take the story to an entirely new level. Portland, Oregon, a city known for its rainy streets, hipster coffee shops, and lush green parks. On the surface, it's quiet, peaceful, and completely ordinary. But tucked away in one of its bustling hospitals, something extraordinary, something explosive, was quietly waiting to be discovered. No one could have predicted that this unassuming location would soon become the center of one of the most shocking revelations about the royal family in modern history. Here, In the digital vaults of patient records and hospital logs, a secret had been preserved, an undeniable truth that would upend everything the world believed about Lilibet Diana, the youngest child of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. The story begins with routine paperwork. Birth certificates, hospital intake forms, and maternity records, all cataloged according to strict privacy rules, sat quietly in their digital folders, unseen by the public eye. Hospitals process thousands of patients every year. Most records never leave their secure systems. But sometimes, the right combination of curiosity, oversight, and persistence can unearth information that was never meant to be public. That's exactly what happened with the Portland hospital. It all started when a source within the hospital, described as a former employee with knowledge of the record-keeping system, noticed an anomaly. A child registered under the name Lilibet Diana had a birth certificate that did not align with the public narrative. Unlike Archie, whose birth had been widely reported with standard medical documentation, Lilibet's record carried a note. Something unusual, almost cryptic. She was delivered through surrogacy. At first, the employee thought it was an error. Hospitals make mistakes, but a deeper look revealed that it was no mistake at all. The details were precise, verified, and legally binding. Lilibet had indeed been born via a surrogate, and the information had been meticulously documented in Portland. Imagine the shock that rippled through anyone who learned this. For decades, the public had been told a story. Meghan and Harry, happily married, raising their children naturally, celebrating milestones as a perfect little family. Every public appearance, every official photograph, every sweet moment captured by the press was now recontextualized. How could a revelation like this remain hidden for so long? How could the carefully maintained narrative withstand scrutiny when the truth was sitting, quietly, in a hospital database? The implications were immediate and far-reaching. Royal watchers, journalists, and insiders understood what this meant. Surrogacy is legal, but it's also a deeply personal, private matter. For the royal family, whose image is built on tradition, protocol, and perceived authenticity, the revelation was seismic. Suddenly, questions arose. Why had the couple chosen surrogacy? Why was it hidden from the public? Who else knew? And most importantly, how would Meghan and Harry react when this information was inevitably exposed? Sources close to the situation describe Meghan's reaction when she first became aware of the hospital records as explosive. She reportedly went into a panic, calling lawyers and advisors, demanding the information be contained at all costs. Witnesses described frantic phone calls, heated discussions, and moments of sheer disbelief. A woman who had long controlled the narrative now found herself reacting instead of directing. For someone who had built her public persona on poise, composure, and media mastery, this was uncharted territory. Meanwhile, Prince Harry faced his own dilemma. Known for his fierce loyalty to Meghan, he reportedly struggled to reconcile the emerging truth with the image the world had come to embrace. The couple's inner circle was immediately mobilized to assess the situation. Legal teams, PR advisors, and confidants worked around the clock, trying to determine the potential fallout. Could the information be suppressed? Could the story be spun in a way that minimized damage? Or was it already too late? The public, of course, would eventually learn. Even before official announcements, whispers began circulating. Bloggers, investigative journalists, and social media users started piecing together the puzzle. The anomaly in the Portland hospital records became a point of fascination, sparking speculation about motives, timing, and hidden agendas. Every public appearance Meghan and Harry had made, every Instagram post featuring Lilibet, suddenly came under scrutiny. Was the smile genuine? Was the photograph staged? Was the narrative they had presented to the world even real? The timing of the leak couldn't have been worse, or perhaps better, depending on perspective, for the Sussexes. With Harry and Meghan already navigating public criticism, canceled projects, and media scrutiny, the revelation of surrogacy struck like a lightning bolt. The world's gaze intensified, focused on a private hospital record in Portland that no one had imagined could have such global significance. And yet, for Meghan, the revelation was deeply personal. It wasn't just about public perception, it was about control, power, and the fragile image she had carefully curated. Inside the hospital, Employees were reportedly shocked at the attention the record suddenly received. Hospital administration faced inquiries, privacy concerns, and the realization that a seemingly mundane file had become a global sensation. Questions about confidentiality, legal obligations, and ethical responsibilities quickly came to the forefront. And while some staff remained tight-lipped, others leaked details to the press, further fueling the fire. The story also raises broader societal questions. Surrogacy, while increasingly accepted in many circles, still carries stigma in certain communities, particularly among traditionalists and those invested in lineage and inheritance. The royal family, steeped in centuries of tradition, operates in a world where appearances matter as much as reality. By revealing that Lilibet was born through surrogacy, the Portland hospital records challenged not just a narrative, but a centuries-old set of expectations about legitimacy, bloodlines, and public perception. And yet, despite the chaos, some details remain astonishingly calm. The record itself is factual, straightforward, and devoid of emotion. It simply states that Lilibet was born via surrogacy, provides dates, names, and medical information. But in the hands of the public, the media, and royal commentators, these sterile facts transform into a sensational narrative. Every legal term, every procedural note, every bureaucratic line is magnified, analyzed, and dissected. What was once hidden in paperwork becomes front-page news, and the ripple effects are immediate. Imagine being Meghan in that moment. A carefully curated life suddenly exposed by a single hospital record. Every decision she had made about appearances, narratives, and public messaging seemed suddenly vulnerable. Every public smile, every statement of pride about her children, now carried an undercurrent of potential deception. Sources describe the moment as tense, emotionally charged, and filled with a sense of urgency that bordered on panic. At the same time, the revelation sparked a media-feeding frenzy. Tabloids, online publications, and social media accounts all scrambled to break the story. Every possible angle was explored: the legality of the surrogacy, the ethics, the palace's reaction, and the implications for Harry, Meghan, and Lilibet. Experts weighed in, insiders commented anonymously, and speculation ran rampant. The story became not just about a hospital record, but about control, secrecy, and the thin line between personal privacy and public fascination. And then there was the broader ripple effect. Royal watchers began re-examining past appearances, interviews, and statements. Every public event Meghan and Harry had participated in was analyzed for clues. Was there a pattern of secrecy? Had the couple carefully managed public perception to conceal the truth? The questions multiplied, creating a storm of intrigue and speculation that shows no sign of slowing. Despite the chaos, the Portland hospital itself remained a quiet, almost surreal center of the unfolding drama. The facility that had once been a place of ordinary medical care had become the focal point of a story that spanned continents. Doctors, nurses, and administrators who had long performed routine duties were now unwitting players in a global narrative that would dominate headlines, online discussions, and public curiosity for weeks, months, perhaps even years. And so, as the records continue to circulate, the world watches with bated breath. Meghan Markle, once the orchestrator of her own narrative, now faces a challenge that no amount of media savvy could have prepared her for. Prince Harry stands at a crossroads, balancing loyalty, love, and legacy. The royal family braces for a public reckoning, knowing that tradition, reputation, and authority are all at stake. And the public? They are left to wonder. How could a single hospital record, buried in the archives of a quiet Portland hospital, unleash a storm of global intrigue, scandal, and betrayal? But what no one saw coming was that this revelation, shocking as it already was only the beginning. What emerged from Portland would ignite a series of reactions, confrontations, and exposures that would escalate beyond anything the world had imagined. And in the midst of it all, Meghan's response would be more dramatic than anyone could have predicted. You could almost hear it before it happened, the scream that would ripple through walls, hallways, and private rooms, shaking even the most seasoned advisors. Meghan Markle, once celebrated for her poise, composure, and media mastery, had reached a breaking point. The Portland hospital records had surfaced, exposing a truth that she had long kept private, a truth that threatened to unravel the carefully curated image she had built over years. Lilibet Diana had been born through surrogacy. The moment she saw the leak, or heard whispers about it, chaos consumed her. Those who were close to the scene describe it as a near-cinematic meltdown, a combination of panic, fury, and disbelief. Calls were made at all hours, advisors were summoned. Lawyers were mobilized. It was the kind of moment that leaves insiders whispering for months afterward, a scene that would eventually make its way into every royal anecdote about Meghan's intensity. Imagine the layers of frustration and fear she must have felt. For years, she had navigated a labyrinth of media scrutiny, palace protocol, and public expectation. She had learned to control the narrative, to shape appearances, and to wield media attention as a weapon or shield depending on the circumstances. And yet, here was a detail, one single record in a hospital archive, capable of dismantling everything. The realization that she could no longer contain the information, that public perception might now turn against her, triggered a reaction that was swift and dramatic. Witnesses described the scene vividly. Phones rang incessantly. Meghan barked instructions to her legal team, demanding immediate containment. Advisors attempted to calm her, but the storm of emotion was overwhelming. She reportedly shouted, pacing from room to room, eyes wide with fury and desperation. Every instinct, honed over years of public appearances and media manipulation, now collided with the sheer unpredictability of reality. But Meghan's reaction was not just about the exposure itself. It was about control. For someone who has built a public persona on the ability to dictate narrative and perception, losing control, even temporarily, is intolerable. The Portland hospital record was more than a document. It was a symbol of vulnerability, a crack in the armor, a confirmation that there were forces beyond her reach. And the public, social media, and press were all waiting, poised to pounce on any hint of weakness. Sources also reveal that Meghan's initial instinct was damage control. Lawyers were contacted immediately, emergency meetings were held, and publicists drafted statements that would never see the light of day. But even the most strategic efforts were too little, too late. Once a secret of this magnitude exists outside of private circles, the world begins to speculate. The leak, intentional or accidental, had begun a ripple effect that no amount of preparation could stop. At the same time, the emotional toll was immense. Meghan had invested years in cultivating her image as a modern, empowered, and transparent royal. Every interview, every speech, every carefully photographed moment with Lilibet and Archie reinforced that image. Now, in an instant, the foundation beneath that image began to shift. For Meghan, the emotional reaction was not merely fear of exposure. It was fear of judgment, of losing the narrative, and of seeing years of carefully orchestrated public perception crumble. What makes this reaction even more striking is the duality of Meghan's position. Publicly, she has always championed transparency, openness, and the modern family. Privately, she has been strategic, calculated, and highly protective of sensitive information. The Portland hospital records exposed a tension between the image of openness and the reality of secrecy. To the public, she is the modern royal, advocating for honesty and empowerment. Behind closed doors, she fights to contain information, protect her family, and maintain control. The contradiction is glaring, and it fuels both media intrigue and public fascination. The frantic efforts to contain the leak were extensive. Emails were sent, calls were placed, and legal notices were drafted, all in a desperate bid to prevent the information from spreading further. Sources claim that Meghan demanded immediate clarification from hospital contacts, questioning how such sensitive information could even exist outside tightly controlled channels. Was it human error? Was it intentional? Or was it a coordinated attempt to expose her? The uncertainty only intensified her fury and anxiety. Even Harry, known for his loyalty and protective nature, was caught off guard. The couple's inner circle reportedly scrambled to navigate the situation, balancing legal, PR, and familial considerations. Every move had consequences. Every statement had the potential to escalate the situation. And while Meghan reacted with fury, Harry had to weigh public perception, family reputation, and the impact on their children. It was a delicate, high-stakes dance that left little room for error. Observers note that Meghan's reaction went beyond immediate panic. It sparked a re-evaluation of past actions, decisions, and appearances. Every public event involving Lilibet suddenly became a topic of scrutiny. The staged photos, carefully timed interviews, and public celebrations of milestones were reinterpreted. Could the surrogacy have been intentionally concealed from the public for strategic reasons? Were appearances designed to reinforce a narrative rather than reflect reality? Each question compounded Meghan's stress and contributed to the intensity of her reaction. Amid the chaos, Meghan's behavior reportedly became more unpredictable. Sources describe her alternating between calm, calculated measures and bursts of emotional intensity. Calls to lawyers were followed by moments of pacing and shouting. Advisors were caught between strategizing legal containment and managing her emotional response. Every passing hour brought new speculation, new leaks, and new complications. The pressure was unrelenting. But even in the midst of this storm, there were strategic moves. Meghan reportedly considered preemptive measures, drafting public statements, planning controlled media appearances, and using allies in the press to shape the narrative. Yet, each potential move was fraught with risk. One misstep could magnify the story instead of containing it. And with social media amplifying every whisper, every leak, every minor inconsistency, the stakes were higher than ever. The emotional intensity of the moment also highlights a rarely seen side of Meghan. To the public, she has long been portrayed as composed, confident, and unflappable. Yet, those who witnessed her reaction to the Portland hospital records describe someone human, vulnerable, and intensely reactive. The scream, the frantic pacing, the phone calls. These were expressions of fear, desperation, and anger. In that moment, the facade of perfect composure cracked, revealing the human complexity behind the public image. Meanwhile, the ripple effect of Meghan's reaction began to extend outward. The media picked up on subtle signs, insiders leaked observations, and speculation grew. Royal experts, commentators, and journalists all began to piece together the story, creating a narrative that intertwined personal vulnerability, strategic missteps, and potential scandal. What was private had quickly become public. What was hidden had been exposed. And Meghan, despite her media savvy and strategic instincts, was forced to react rather than direct. At the heart of this chaos is a fundamental tension: control versus reality. Meghan, accustomed to shaping narratives, now faced a situation that was beyond her influence. The Portland hospital records existed independently of her control. They were facts, legally binding and verifiable. No amount of public relations spin, no statement to the press, no calculated media appearance could erase the reality of the documents. And as the hours passed, the tension intensified, the stakes escalated, and the world waited to see what she would do next. Even more astonishing is the personal dimension of the reaction. The Portland hospital records did not just threaten public perception, they threatened personal identity, familial narrative, and emotional equilibrium. For Meghan, the revelation was deeply personal, touching on fears of judgment, exposure, and loss of control. For Harry, it was a balancing act between defending his wife and managing the family's reputation. For their children, it introduced uncertainty and potential scrutiny that they could not yet understand. And just when it seemed that the story had reached its peak of tension, something unexpected occurred. A new leak, an anonymous tip, or perhaps an overlooked detail threatened to escalate the drama even further. What Meghan thought she could contain was now spiraling beyond her control. And in that moment, her fury, her panic, and her desperation became a spectacle in their own right. A drama unfolding in real time, visible to those close to her and eventually to the world at large. The intensity of Meghan's reaction, the desperation, the legal maneuvers, and the frantic attempts at damage control set the stage for a narrative that would dominate headlines, social media, and royal commentary. And as we move forward, the consequences of this reaction, both public and private, will continue to unfold, exposing new layers of intrigue, strategy, and emotional complexity. The news broke like a storm, sweeping across the globe in minutes. Social media exploded. News outlets scrambled to catch up. Headlines screamed with disbelief. Meghan Markle in panic after Lilibet's surrogacy exposed. Portland hospital reveals royal secret. Sussex family facade cracks. Millions of people, many of whom had followed Meghan and Harry's lives for years, sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had just learned. How could a royal secret, hidden for so long, be revealed in such a quiet, ordinary hospital on the other side of the Atlantic? And how could it now become the most explosive story in modern royal history? It began with whispers. A few investigative journalists, following obscure tips, started piecing together information from the Portland hospital. Soon, it spread to larger news organizations, trending hashtags on Twitter, viral posts on Instagram, and endless TikTok videos dissecting the implications. Within hours, the story had gone global. People who had never paid attention to the intricacies of royal protocol suddenly became experts overnight, debating surrogacy laws, privacy rights, and royal succession. The world had been captivated, not just by the revelation itself, but by the audacity, secrecy, and the sheer shock of it. For the public, the reaction was immediate and visceral. Fans felt betrayed. Supporters were confused. Critics, who had long questioned Meghan's authenticity, were vindicated. Comments flooded social media feeds. All along, we were being lied to. How could they hide something like this? Is anything about them real? The revelation forced people to reevaluate everything they had believed about the Sussex family. Every photograph, every appearance, every statement suddenly carried the weight of skepticism. The online conversation was relentless. Memes emerged almost immediately, some humorous, some cutting, all relentless. Digital artists and commentators remixed photos of Lilibet with commentary about surrogacy, secrecy, and royal facades. Forums were flooded with theories about why Meghan and Harry had chosen surrogacy, who had known, and what this meant for the monarchy. Even late-night shows and podcasts began devoting segments to dissecting the implications, often speculating on motives and questioning past appearances. It was as if the entire globe had collectively paused, holding its breath as the story unfolded in real time. And yet, the shock was not just public, it was deeply personal for those close to the family. Royal aides, advisors, and insiders found themselves navigating a complex web of secrecy, loyalty, and emerging reality. The palace, always sensitive to public opinion, had to act swiftly, balancing discretion with damage control. Sources revealed that private meetings were convened to address the fallout. The discussions were tense, emotionally charged, and filled with uncertainty. How should they respond? What should be said? How could they maintain dignity while the world watched their every move? Every decision carried immense weight, and the clock was ticking. For Meghan and Harry, the public shock intensified the private crisis. Public reaction is one thing when a story is manageable, but when millions are watching, analyzing, and judging, it becomes another level of pressure entirely. Meghan, already reeling from her discovery of the Portland hospital records, now faced a world eager to dissect her every reaction. Harry, whose loyalty to his wife is unwavering, had to consider both their public image and the potential implications for the royal family. Every move, every statement, every reaction had the potential to amplify the situation. The scrutiny was relentless, and there was no place to hide. The story also had a ripple effect beyond the immediate family. The public, caught in a cycle of fascination, outrage, and curiosity, began to question broader themes. The role of secrecy in the royal family, the ethics of surrogacy, the balance between personal privacy and public interest. Talk shows, news outlets, and social media threads debated whether surrogacy should be considered private, whether it was ethical to conceal such information, and what it said about modern monarchy. Suddenly, a single hospital record in Portland had sparked a global conversation that transcended celebrity and royalty. It touched on ethics, legality, and public expectation. Experts weighed in almost immediately. Legal analysts discussed the ramifications of the surrogacy revelation, addressing issues like lineage, inheritance, and the potential impact on royal succession. Psychologists examined the emotional and psychological toll on Meghan, Harry, and their children. Sociologists debated the broader cultural implications, exploring why the public is so captivated by royal life, why secrecy matters, and how perception shapes reality. Every new analysis added fuel to the fire, increasing public interest and keeping the story in constant rotation across news cycles. Meanwhile, social media amplified every detail. Fans combed through old interviews, public appearances, and photos for signs they may have missed. Was there a subtle signal in the way Meghan held Lilibet? A detail in Harry's expressions during a public engagement? Every moment was scrutinized as people tried to piece together a narrative that now felt fractured and uncertain. The excitement and obsession were palpable, and the story quickly became a case study in how information and revelation can dominate the public imagination almost instantly. The reactions were often contradictory, highlighting the intense emotional roller coaster of public sentiment. Some expressed sympathy for Meghan, framing the surrogacy as a private family matter unfairly exposed to the world. Others expressed outrage, questioning her transparency and authenticity, accusing her of deception. Discussions were heated, arguments broke out in comment sections, and debates spilled into mainstream media. It was as though the public could not process the information in a linear way. It had shattered expectations, and people struggled to make sense of the new reality. Amid this chaos, the palace began to implement its own measures to manage public perception. Sources revealed discreet communications to media outlets, carefully worded statements, and strategic appearances designed to redirect focus. Every move was calculated, every gesture deliberate. But the public's fascination had already reached a fever pitch, and controlling the narrative proved nearly impossible. The leak had set a momentum that could not easily be stopped, and the palace was forced to operate in a high-stakes environment with little room for error. Even Harry, typically composed in public crises, reportedly felt the weight of public reaction. He was caught between defending Meghan, preserving the dignity of his family, and managing the fallout of a revelation that was both personal and highly public. Every interaction he had with the press, every interview, every statement carried potential consequences. Observers noted a subtle shift in his demeanor, a seriousness and intensity not always present in his public persona, reflecting the enormity of the situation. Meanwhile, Meghan's personal reaction remained a point of fascination. Sources describe a woman oscillating between calculated strategy and raw emotional intensity. The public was unaware of the private storm. The tears, the shouts, the frantic calls to advisors, the desperate attempts to regain control, but they were about to witness the fallout in real time. Social media, leaks, and subtle gestures and appearances all hinted at the emotional pressure building behind the polished public facade. The story also highlighted the role of timing and circumstance. The revelation came at a particularly volatile moment for the Sussexes as they navigated canceled deals, public scrutiny, and ongoing tensions with the royal family. If the leak had occurred earlier, perhaps it could have been contained or framed differently. But the timing amplified the impact, creating a perfect storm of public shock, media frenzy, and personal crisis. Every detail was magnified, every reaction scrutinized, and every decision carried consequences. By now, the story had taken on a life of its own. The Portland hospital records were no longer just documents. They were symbols, catalysts, and proof that the carefully constructed narrative of the Sussex family was fragile, vulnerable, and under public scrutiny. For Meghan and Harry, every moment became a calculation. For the palace, it was a crisis management challenge. For the public, it was an irresistible spectacle. And just when the world thought they had absorbed the shock, just when public discourse seemed to reach a plateau, a new element emerged: an anonymous source, a leaked conversation, or a previously unseen document that threatened to escalate the drama even further. The shock was no longer contained. It was evolving, deepening, and taking unexpected turns. Every revelation has a backstory, a chain of events leading to the moment when the truth can no longer be hidden. In the case of Lilibet Diana, the timeline of her surrogacy is a story of meticulous planning, carefully managed appearances, and deliberate concealment. It is a story that stretches from the private beginnings of Meghan and Harry's family planning all the way to the explosive emergence of the Portland hospital records that would shake the world. To understand the magnitude of this revelation, we must piece together each stage, each decision, each calculated move that kept the secret hidden for so long. It begins with whispers in the media long before Lilibet was born. Rumors about Meghan's pregnancies, the timing of announcements, and selective public appearances had always sparked speculation. Fans and critics alike debated what they were being shown and what they were not. For every official announcement or hospital photo, there were months of silence, carefully curated gaps that allowed the world to construct its own narrative. But within these silences lay secrets. The world had no idea that during these periods, the couple was orchestrating a private plan involving surrogacy, a plan that would eventually leave a permanent mark on royal history. The initial stages of the surrogacy plan were reportedly carried out in utmost secrecy. According to insiders, Meghan and Harry consulted a close circle of advisors and legal experts, ensuring that every step was legally and logistically secure. Surrogacy, particularly in the United States, involves complex legal frameworks, agreements, medical protocols, and meticulous documentation. The process is not simply about conception. It is about ensuring the privacy and protection of all parties involved. Meghan and Harry, acutely aware of their public profile and the media's interest, were determined to manage every detail without exposing it to the outside world. Timing was crucial. The surrogacy had to be aligned with public expectations, media narratives, and personal milestones. The couple carefully calculated when announcements would be made, when public appearances could be staged, and how each milestone would be presented to the world. Every event, every photo, every statement was strategically planned to maintain the illusion of a conventional family journey. In other words, the public story was designed to reinforce a facade of normalcy, while behind the scenes, a more complex reality was unfolding. Medical procedures, as described by sources familiar with the process, were conducted in strict confidentiality. Only the necessary medical staff, legal counsel, and select advisors were aware of the full details. The surrogate, a professional engaged under binding agreements, played a central role, but her identity and participation were tightly protected. This level of secrecy required coordination, vigilance, and unwavering discretion. A single leak could unravel months of planning, and Meghan, ever conscious of public perception, took extraordinary measures to ensure that this did not happen. Meanwhile, the couple maintained a public schedule that projected continuity and normalcy. Meghan's maternity appearances, interviews about family life, and staged events were carefully synchronized with the surrogacy timeline. These appearances were not just about image. They were about creating a narrative that aligned with public expectations. Every detail, from the way Meghan held Lilibet to the timing of social media posts, reinforced the story the world was meant to believe. The public, unaware of the underlying truth, celebrated these moments as authentic milestones, never suspecting that the timeline had been orchestrated. In addition to appearances, the couple engaged in extensive legal and financial preparations. Surrogacy in the United States requires a series of legal documents, parental rights agreements, medical consents, confidentiality clauses, and sometimes complex financial arrangements. Meghan and Harry's team reportedly navigated these hurdles with precision, ensuring that every legal detail was airtight. The goal was not only to protect privacy, but also to prevent any possibility of the surrogate revealing the arrangement prematurely. Each step was calculated to shield the family from public scrutiny until the time they deemed appropriate for disclosure, which, as we now know, never came. The Portland hospital, it turns out, played an unintentional but critical role in the timeline. The child's birth was documented as required by law, creating an official record that was completely legitimate. At the time, the records were securely filed and meant to remain confidential, protected by federal privacy regulations. But within these archives lay the proof of a carefully concealed truth, a truth that, when discovered years later, would become explosive. The hospital staff had no idea that the seemingly routine documentation would one day dominate headlines across the globe. From a media perspective, the surrogacy timeline also highlights the intricate dance between visibility and concealment. While the public was aware of Meghan's growing family, every statement was measured, every photograph staged, and every narrative controlled. There were deliberate silences, subtle shifts in public messaging, and carefully chosen words to maintain consistency with the public story. The timeline was designed not to deceive out of malice, but to manage perception, to maintain privacy, and to navigate the unique pressures of being modern royals under constant scrutiny. Yet, as with any secret, even the most carefully managed plans are vulnerable. The Portland hospital records represent the moment when a private timeline intersected with public exposure. The meticulously orchestrated sequence of events, spanning months of planning and coordination, suddenly faced a breach. What had been hidden, protected, and controlled was now at risk of being publicly dissected, analyzed, and debated. The impact was immediate. Questions erupted, speculation ran rampant, and the public's perception of the Sussex family shifted in real time. For Meghan and Harry, the timeline's exposure meant more than just a public relations crisis. It represented a loss of control over a narrative they had carefully curated. Every public appearance, every carefully staged milestone, and every media statement was now reinterpreted in the light of surrogacy. Fans who had once admired their openness felt betrayed. Critics who had questioned their transparency felt vindicated. And the couple, caught between personal vulnerability and public scrutiny, faced a dilemma unlike any they had experienced before. The timeline also reveals an element of contradiction. Meghan has long positioned herself as an advocate for openness, empowerment, and transparency, particularly around issues of family, equality, and reproductive rights. Yet, the surrogacy, hidden from the public, challenges this image. It exposes a tension between personal privacy and public expectation, between managing a family's safety and maintaining credibility. The timeline illustrates not deception in a moral sense, but strategic management, a calculated attempt to control the narrative in the face of inevitable curiosity and media scrutiny. Furthermore, the surrogacy timeline sheds light on the complex interplay between family, media, and monarchy. Royals are expected to conform to centuries of tradition, while simultaneously adapting to modern public expectations. The Sussexes, ambitious, media-savvy, and global in outlook, attempted to navigate both worlds. The timeline of Lilibet's birth reflects the delicate balancing act, protecting privacy while satisfying public curiosity, maintaining dignity while managing appearances, and shielding personal life while preparing for inevitable exposure. Even with careful planning, the timeline could not prevent the ultimate revelation. The Portland hospital records, detailed, legitimate, and factual, had remained secure for years but eventually surfaced, exposing the orchestrated reality of Lilibet's birth. The meticulous sequence of events, designed to shield the family from scrutiny, had collided with an unpredictable element, a leak, an insider, or a chance discovery. And in that collision, the public gained access to a story that had been hidden for far too long. As the timeline of surrogacy comes into focus, the implications for Meghan, Harry, and the public become clear. What had once been a private, controlled process is now a global spectacle. Every step in the carefully plotted sequence, from conception to birth to public appearances, is scrutinized. Every motive, every choice, every strategic decision is questioned. The timeline not only reveals a hidden truth, but also exposes the fragility of even the most meticulously maintained public narratives. And just when it seems the timeline has reached its conclusion, when the public has absorbed the facts of Lilibet's birth, an unexpected twist emerges. A detail overlooked, a connection previously hidden, or a new leak threatens to complicate the story even further. The carefully constructed sequence of events, intended to preserve secrecy and control, now teeters on the edge of complete exposure. The palace is a world apart from the public eye, a place where appearances, protocol, and unspoken rules govern every interaction. When news of Lilibet Diana's surrogacy reached the corridors of the royal family, it did not arrive as a casual update or passing rumor. It landed like a bombshell, reverberating through the private offices, drawing whispers in the hallways, and sparking urgent, closed-door meetings. The reaction of the royal family behind these walls is a story in itself, full of tension, loyalty, fear, and the kind of emotional intensity the public rarely sees. At the center of this storm was King Charles, A monarch who has spent decades preserving tradition, reputation, and dignity, Charles now faced a challenge unlike any before. The revelation that Lilibet, the child of his son and daughter-in-law, was born via surrogacy struck at the heart of the monarchy's image. Not merely the public image, but the very perception of lineage, succession, and propriety. Royal insiders described Charles's reaction as measured on the surface, but simmering with intense concern. There were questions to answer, strategies to devise, and above all, a need to contain the situation before it spiraled further. Camilla, long experienced in navigating the complex dynamics of the royal family, reportedly approached the revelation with a mixture of skepticism and calculation. While she maintained outward composure, sources suggest that she immediately began assessing potential damage, not just to the family's reputation, but to her own standing within the monarchy. Every new piece of information about Meghan and Harry was weighed carefully, analyzed for leverage, and scrutinized for implications. Camilla's approach was both strategic and emotionally intelligent, recognizing that the unfolding scandal could shift public sympathy, family loyalty, and media narratives. Prince William's reaction, according to insiders, was a mix of disbelief, frustration, and protective instinct. Known for his seriousness and focus on duty, William reportedly felt both anger at the secrecy and concern for the precedent it might set within the family. The revelation forced him to reconsider every interaction he had with Harry and Meghan in recent years. Every conversation, every visit, every gesture now seemed potentially loaded with hidden meaning. And yet, even as he grappled with personal feelings of betrayal, William understood the necessity of measured public composure. Unlike the social media frenzy that greeted the news, within the palace, every word, gesture, and expression was calculated.